Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our conversation. I'm Colin Line. I'm the Youth Ministry Coordinator here at St. Anne's Parish. And back on the other side of the couch. Nice to see you.
Yes, I'm Father Matthew, the pastor here at St. Anne's. Back after a couple weeks away.
Yeah, we had a few special co-hosts, I guess, who went from our famous hot seat over here and flipped to the other side of the couch. And Clark was worried. He's like, is this an interview process? Is this a permanent transition? I said, it all depends what the feedback is, you know. But and Patty, I think, were with us. And yeah, it was great. And so this is fun. We had the first time we got to talk about your homily without you here, so
yes.
that was fun. And then last week we got to share a little bit about Father Denis, who has been with us filling in so gracefully, and again this weekend. But now you get to share about Father Denis's homily, which is pretty fun. Yeah. But before we do that, you've been away for a little bit, and how was that time? And welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. It's a weird thing, of course. Everything is different in COVID, including vacation time. So it's not a usual sort of thing. And normally what I would do, when I get my vacations, I like to travel or explore somewhere new. You know, that's the sort of thing I would normally do, which I can't do so much now. But it was kind of a nice thing in a way, because I just spent a lot of time with family on vacation, which is what I did. And especially a couple of cousins who I realized as I saw them, I hadn't had a chance to really connect with them, because I would see them in big family events and there's 50 people around, you know, but I haven't had a lot of one-on-one time with these guys for a long time. And one of them is taking the LSAT. I had no idea he was going into law school, but he was studying for the LSAT. There's all these big things happening in people's lives that I sort of lost touch with. It was a really nice chance just to go deep and spend good time with some good people.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was most of it.
Cool. We didn't burn down the place. So
yeah, I was still here, still looking good. That's nice. Yeah.
I think we kept the parish afloat. So there was a bit of a panic there, as you know, some of the COVID rules were changing, and we didn't know if that was affecting us or not. And I was like, is this? Do we interrupt Father Matt? I don't know. But it's so there's a bit of a panic. 24 hours, and then we figured out. I think we're okay for now.
Doesn't affect us for now. But that wasn't. It was an odd thing actually being away when because the numbers really did move up a lot in the last 2 weeks while I was gone. And there's a lot of stress around that, of course. It was tough being away while that happened, but it's good to know that I've got people who I can trust to keep things going well while I'm gone.
Well, and I think our premise has been we're going to keep doing our practices, and it seems to be working well. And I know Discovery started up, I think, during that time, and Junior Youth was happening again. We're like, okay, can we still do this? And, I think Jump happened, and just continue to just do what we've been doing, right? Do what's possible within the rules, the regulations, and our creativity, and figuring out to say, okay, we've been doing this for, I don't know, is it 8 months, 6 months? It seems like forever, but we
Mass
keep
is
adapting.
especially, and I think that's such a good point, that we've been doing Mass in person with COVID precautions since the end of May.
Yeah.
And not just St. Anne's, but across the province, it's been happening since the end of May. And there's been no cases that have been announced anyway of any transmissions at Catholic parishes.
Yeah.
And that's really thousands of people coming and going. So it shows that, as we're smart with this, there's things we can do. And I'm glad we have other ministries too starting up within COVID precautions.
Yeah, I remember
just
last night, we're recording on Wednesday, so there's Junior Youth last night, and I said, I had to deal with the dynamic of there was a mass going on. I think it was a CDL Memorial Mass, or Memorial Mass, and Junior Youth, and I was like, I gotta close the doors so my hype music isn't distracting during the consecration. I was like, I'm not used to other stuff happening, because it's been pretty quiet. And I said, this is nice to have kind of that logistical chaos that sometimes we got to deal with.
Make sure the sound is not going from Mass into the hall. So
we had to go both ways.
My homily while youth ministry is
I feel our noise might have been more distracting the other way, but as we were playing Impossible Shot with Nerf guns, but it's been great to kind of journey through and just keep trucking to say we can still be church and we can figure this out. And, but we're glad to have you back. It's
good to be back as well.
We can let the ship kind of wander for a little while, but at some point we need the captain back up there.
I miss being away too. It's good to be around.
Well, we're glad. Sometimes there's always that concern. It's is it going to come back? Maybe it's just this is the good life.
I'll just disappear. I don't know.
There you go. Do we want to dive into what Father Denis offered us?
Yeah, and I'm grateful. Especially Father Denis has been really generous, as a couple of times I've been away lately. Sure. So we're really grateful for him.
Yeah. So thank
you, Father Denis, if you watch this. I am very grateful.
I just loved his overarching thing. He kind of went into the 3 questions, and but really his premise was this idea of I dare you to ask God questions.
Yeah.
I dare you to ask Jesus, a question, and kind of going to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and how often Christ responded, but maybe not in the way they anticipated, right?
Yeah.
He kind of like caught him off guard and pointed him kind of to a bigger truth, maybe.
Yeah, and I found that interesting as a homily approach, and it's rare, of course, for me as a priest to hear someone else's homily. It doesn't happen a lot when I'm gone, but I did go back and rewatch his, and I was wondering what he's going to do, because the gospel, of course, was the question they asked Jesus is, what's the greatest commandment?
Yeah.
And then response to love God with heart, mind, soul, and strength, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's one of those gospels when I preach on it, I think like, this is beautiful, but also what am I supposed to do with this? Because we all have heard it so many times, like we know it so very well. So, well, what is he going to do with this? I thought it was interesting that he didn't focus so much on the content of Jesus' answer, but just on the reality that they did question Jesus and he did respond.
Yeah.
And like you said, like they asked for one greatest commandment and Jesus gave them a whole lot more than what they had asked for.
Yeah, he had a great line in there later, but I'll just say it now because it connects to that. Is he said at some point that Jesus is too much.
Yeah.
It's like they were like, Jesus, I was just looking for this answer. It's
exactly.
like, Ezra's like, what's 2 + 2? My son. And I was like, oh, it's 4. But instead of sometimes I was like, well, this is how you figure out 2 + 2.
Yeah.
So he's like, whoa. I just want to know what 2 + 2 is.
Yeah.
But
and especially this answer was not just like too much information, but it was a really radical call that Jesus gave them.
Sure.
That like what matters most is to love God with all you've got and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
And not the content, not just the information, I guess, but the life that he calls us to. I think it's much more that feels like too much sometimes.
And I appreciate sometimes when you get homilies like this that don't ignore, sometimes the content per se, but put it in like framework of it to say how this reading even comes together. There's a lesson in that, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the beautiful part of this. And also part of me just thinks like this reading is so beautiful and kind of just straight up. Like
how do you top that? Really, what Jesus says?
Exactly.
Like,
it's kind of like
we should do what he says. That's great.
Yeah, that's maybe a classic mic drop. Just do it and just walk away. But and I just really, we were just sharing right before. I love hearing people's stories, right, and kind of pulling the onion back of their journey. But especially some of our clergy and religious and people who've kind of really discerned their vocation, how to live for Christ. Of some of those questions, some of the parts of their journey and the chapters of their life, and he kind of peeled the onion back of his life a little bit.
Yeah, so that was kind of the structure of his homily,
Yeah.
right? Was he shared these 3 questions that he asked of Jesus, and then challenged us that I dare you to ask him as well. So maybe we could talk through those 3, because I found it interesting too, and especially to hear that personal sharing from him.
Definitely.
And I wrote it down, then pushed it away here. But so his first question, he asked of Jesus, and this I think was when he was in high school, right?
I believe so. Yeah, it was.
He
like
asked the question of like, Jesus, what do you want of me? And where he was, Father Denis saying, well, he was going to be a pharmacist, which I did
love
not
that.
know. That was interesting.
Specifically, it seemed he wanted the white coat. And I was like,
I was really excited about that white
I was like,
coat.
it's Halloween right now, Father Denis. Like, just go to
It's your time.
Valley Village and get your white coat.
But then the answer, of course, that Jesus gave him was to be a priest.
Yeah.
And he mentioned when he got that answer, his first response being like a lot of fear. And I can definitely relate to that, because I received my call around that same time. And it was a similar sort of prayer that I had prayed. And it was a similar response of like, oh, shoot, like this is not the answer I wanted, Lord. Can you give me something else?
Was it, in your case, do you think it was, were you like, you just straight up wanted a different answer? Or was like, I wasn't ready to hear that answer right now? Or
I think I was just so not expecting it, I guess. Like priesthood was not all on my radar.
Yeah, it just totally caught you off guard.
Until it came. Yeah, absolutely. And I had not imagined, like you always have sort of visions of what you could do as a kid, right? And there's a lot of different ideas.
Sure.
But priesthood had just never been there at all. So yeah,
that's interesting. As I think about that, and I can think of my discernment a little bit of religious life at one point, and I had a big kind of struggle of like, should I be a father or a father? That kind of classic thing. And anyways, that's a story for another day. But there was a period in a prayer and adoration when I kind of just threw down the gauntlet. And I was like, Lord, like I'm ready. Like my bags are packed. I'm ready to go. Is that John Denver song? And and it was just like crickets, because I was, in my mind at that moment was for seminary, and I was just like, and it was obvious it wasn't that the Lord wasn't speaking to me, but the Lord's answer was not that, and I knew the other path was there, and terrified me because, in my case, and like again, everyone has to figure it out. But it was the case of, and it's not fair to say, but in my brain in that time, seminary, in a certain sense, seemed the easier path for me in that time in life, because it would avoid the ways that I needed to grow.
Yeah.
For me at that time.
Yeah,
right?
that's very fair.
That it's like being in relationship, journeying and getting to know someone, to be vulnerable in a day-to-day way.
Oh, yeah.
To learn how to communicate well and, work through issues, and to open myself to trust in like a very, vulnerable and be open to woundiness and healing. I was like, I wasn't ready for that,
Yeah.
And the Lord's like, nope, that's what you need right now. And so I can relate to that. I also just want to plug, good on you, Knights of Columbus, who paid for him to go on this retreat.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point as well.
That's just that idea that the community fosters vocations, right? Yeah. And it's such a practical thing. Maybe it's because I'm the youth minister, but I think about that of like, not when I was younger, I remember he was the associate pastor of my parish, but was very adamant about that type of stuff, right? Of providing opportunities or places to basically give space for young people to ask the question, right? And for God to speak into their lives, right? And that he was very adamant that the community had to help foster those moments. Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And I do love, to the point from Father Denis, that this is a question we can ask of Jesus: what do you want of me?
Mm-hmm.
And we can't expect him to give an answer. And sometimes, the answer is quite clear, like it was for Father Denis. Sometimes it wasn't. And I guess, like you mentioned too, that the answer being crickets for a while, right? But that is, we keep asking and ask persistently and ask really willing to follow where he leads.
Yeah.
That it's a question we can ask him and an answer we can get.
That's a great one. And there's even a humility in that too, right? To say, just in the asking these bigger questions, that we're in a sense already admitting we don't have the answer.
Yeah.
And that we're gonna trust that the Lord has a better answer maybe than our own. You know? Yeah.
And one issue I found with that, and this would be maybe a whole other conversation we could have, is the question of, first of all, like, because I do have people come to me saying, like, I've been praying, I've been asking, and like I can't seem to get an answer. Or also sometimes too, I think another struggle we can fall into sometimes is almost a discernment paralysis, where we'll sort of keep on asking and keep on asking and keep on asking, but then it's hard to tell, is the answer the Lord? Is it me? Like, is it the Holy Spirit? Is it adrenaline? Oh. And sometimes there's almost a fear of taking a step. And I know, actually, I had a bishop actually I was talking with, that I was wrestling with his call to priesthood. He said, like, you've got all these doors in front of you, but eventually you just need to walk through one of them. And just trust that if it's not the right one, the Lord's going to show you that.
Yeah.
But our call is not to just sit in discernment for 20 years.
This is totally another conversation. This is a big thing for me. When I was a young adult in my first go around in parish youth ministry and working with a bunch of young adults, and I don't know where the line, so I can't attribute it, but it became a thing in kind of this guys group I was in, of this line that discernment has a beginning and an end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because we're noticing in our lives and some of the people around us that we were in a state of perpetual discernment.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, no, that's delaying decision making.
Yeah.
That's not a courageous act. Right? Yeah. And we were using the word discernment to kind of just be covering up a lack of trust, right?
Yeah.
And a lack of a boldness of spirit and surrender. And also this understanding that is like, okay, if it isn't the right choice or in that moment, I was like, do you not believe that the God who loves you and has a plan for you is not going to steer and guide you if you give your life to him and surrender and risk it? And that's such a good, that's a whole,
we could rant so maybe actually, so not only ask, but like ask and then respond to the answer.
Yeah.
Is an important piece of this. So that was the first question, was what do you want of me? And then the second question that Father Denis shared that I found really touching, actually, was he talked about becoming a priest at the time of Vatican II. But then just all the confusion that happened with the reforms and all that. And it sounded like he said, this is where I wish he would have shared more, like he was actually at one point like doubting if God is real. And to think of a priest asking that question, like that's kind of story I'd like to hear more behind that.
Yeah, and I think it was just refreshing because I don't know, like, you're human. You have good days.
What?
You have bad days. Like he's
Don't
not a
tell the
robot,
whole-
guys.
don't
I've
tell the
tested
whole
him.
internet
I've
these
pinched him.
things. Oh, no.
We don't charge him at the end of the day. Like, but just like a little bit of vulnerability. I don't know, you share personal stories in different times, but this idea of like, well, yeah, it makes sense that maybe they would doubt or struggle. And
Yeah.
I mean, their world was turned upside down. Like you were sharing even sometimes your old seminary and the, the rule and the, ways of things
Back
were
into
changing.
the challenge. It was hard for people after the count.
For sure.
What God was calling us to.
And
yeah.
I think it's just beautiful to kind of be able to hear, to say, yeah. And the reality is we know we lost a lot of people, and but we also know there was renewal and there was growth, and Father Denis stayed, like we said, 56 years or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Just mind-boggling to me, but
and then so his question that he asked is, if God is real, why can't I experience him?
Yeah.
Right. Or I guess maybe, God, if you're real, why can't I experience you, if it was straight to him?
Yeah. I was like, how many times have I found myself in that place, right? And I was like, that's just such a beautiful question to hear, I think, from the pulpit, because I don't know, but I can't even guess how many people were like, yes,
yeah,
like I've been there,
yeah,
for sure.
And another question that I've experienced in ministry before, similar to that, is, God, if you're real, show me. And I found that as a challenge to those who are maybe at a retreat and don't want to be there, or think they don't believe in God, like to offer that as a prayer for people to pray. And like, I've seen the Lord give great answers to that. I've also seen him not at that time, I guess.
Yeah.
But the prayer for the one who doesn't know how to pray, I guess.
Yeah, and there also is that trust and surrender, that in his time and in his ways. But yeah, I've also experienced that oftentimes the Lord will show up, in profound ways and ways you don't expect. And that might be in that moment or down the line.
Yeah.
But there's still an answer in that. But I think the real struggle is when there isn't that immediate revelation or experience, quote unquote, maybe the danger, is that the right word, is where I find where that can be handled well or not so well is that person in community and in relationship, right? If they're in isolation, that the deafness, the lack of response, or that perceived response anyways, could be a real struggle to journey with on your own, right? But if
people can journey with you through that.
And people who've maybe gone through that or have some experience or wisdom, that can help. But what did you think about his point where he emphasized in that question that to not maybe be afraid of it, and actually he pointed out that those questions are often planted by God himself.
That's a really interesting point, I thought. That if you're asking, especially if you have like doubts and things like that, to see them as given you by God to draw you deeper in relationship with him, I guess, and deeper into his truth. Yeah, I'd never put it that way before, but I like it a lot. And I found something that comes up a lot in confession that people will bring is they'll confess having doubts. And I'm glad that they bring it there because it gives you a chance to talk about it. But I like that point of it, because what I always try to tell people is, like, it's not so much the question that is a problem, but it's what we do with it. And if the question leads you to stop going to mass and to stop praying and to walk away from God, then that's a real concern, of course. But if the question leads you to bring it to God and to research and to ask people who you trust to help you, like, there is a lot of growth can come from those doubts and those questions. Yeah,
we had a whole series in junior youth last year from the resource we had called Doubt. And it was all about, what do you do with your questions? Is it okay to have questions? But it talked about the idea of having community, and that the church provides answers. He talked, Jesus is the final answer. Spoilers, the end of the homily, but that we can point to that in resources. And I found it so refreshing to enjoy and to say, like, wow, these young people have so many questions. Yeah, it's not just young people
to know that, and I think for the young people to know that, like, we aren't threatened by that. Yeah, and the church isn't threatened by that, and we encourage those questions is really important.
Yeah. I'm in 1,000 Facebook groups and stuff for ministry, but there was one, I forget the original poster. Basically, he was struggling to say their son or daughter was expressing a lot of doubts or concerns, is God real, all this kind of classic stuff. Yeah. And just asking for kind of support and prayers and feedback. And I was really kind of not caught off, I maybe caught off guard, but it was just refreshing that I loved, because some people are like, oh, praying for you, or giving like practical answers, or like show them this, or give them these, 5 defenses of why God is real, or whatever.
Here's some Aquinas for you.
Yeah, and all useful things. And this one person I know in ministry kind of responded and to say, like, I know this, I don't want to sound like kind of gruff, or that I don't feel kind of your pain or the struggle, but he's like, I love these moments, right? Because if it handled well, and in relationship, this is a great moment potentially of maturity of faith.
Yeah.
If we journey alongside well, in vulnerability and truth, and he kind of expressed that with his own children and people he had ministered with. He was like, it was all about them knowing they had a space to ask the questions, and how they were listened and they were accompanied. That was more critical to them than any answers provided from the other party. That
is so true. And yeah, I do think in those situations, it's less the person, like, they don't need an argument so much as they need it like a story and a chance to share their story. And so, like, this is what brought me to that point, and this is where I'm at. And
yeah.
Oh,
I like that. They don't need an argument, they need a story. Yeah. I'm going to put that on a wall somewhere.
So it's good to have reasons, right? There's room for that, but I think it's got to start with that relationship in the story.
For sure.
Yeah. I think it's maybe Sherry Waddell in her work. There's a line of like, never accept a label in place of a story. And I found that's so very true.
Right on.
Yeah. So then that's that question, I guess, is if God is real, why could I experience him? And to not be afraid of taking those doubts to the Lord is key. And then question number 3 that Father Denis shared is another time in his life when he was praying, and he asked God the question, what do you want me to do? And this is similar to that first one of what do you want of me, except what do you want me to do is more like, as he's living his priesthood, what is God calling him to?
Yeah, this is almost like practical, like day-to-day life living out kind of, where number 1 was kind of the bigger kind of calling, right?
Which is good that discernment is not only these like vocational, like life decisions, but also it's more day-to-day questions too.
Yep.
Yeah. And then some of the answer that God gave him, as he said, was like to give your money away, give your savings away.
Clear out the bank account.
Yeah.
Keep your beater of a car, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I don't know. I like that he kind of had, like you said, the bookends, right? Is sometimes we go to God in the big times, or the moments of crisis, or moment of great questions.
Yeah.
But also he kind of rooted it back to say, but we also need to go to him daily and in the practical and kind of, the guiding way. And which I think is important, because often, like, to others, when we think about evangelizing or sharing the gospel and what it means to be a Christian, like, that's where they bump up against us, right? Is not maybe in our big questions, but how we act in the supermarket, like how we are good neighbors, how do we relate to our children, how do we serve the community or the poor, that God has placed in our life. And it's easy to sometimes get just busy or, distracted,
That's true. And just to get into our ruts. And that's, I think, in part back to the gospel, is where Jesus was trying to get people, because it's easy when you're in like a faith with a lot of rules, as we have, and as the Jewish faith has as well, to get caught up in those minute details. And that's kind of what that question is, right? Of all these 600 laws we have, what's the most important one? But then Jesus' answer of love pulls you out of that rut, I guess, and out of those minute details into more like, this is the reason for all these other things that we worry about.
It's the idea of almost like pulling back to that, I love that TED Talk, Simon Sinek. I was listening to another homily from Father Michael Schmitz that kind of connected to that, of like kind of that greater why, right? And from that, it really informs, Simon Sinek does, why to the how, to the what, and what be kind of the daily, life of a disciple, right? And to say, we can kind of get rooted in that. And I know for myself, I felt a bit of it sounds weird to say, a revival a little bit during COVID times, like in the first few months of like, okay, we're going to pray the chaplet. Me and Ezra are going to go on at 3, and we're going to get that. And our family, the kids being excited to pray the chaplet of Divine Mercy, and we can do this. And it was like, but why? I was like, because this is the root, right? This is going back to the words of the gospel. And it really started to help us reflect of like, when all life is going crazy, what remains?
Yeah.
Like what is presented in front of us?
I felt the same. And for me too, it was, and for like several months, really like my only question was, how do I get the mass to people? And that was like the only thing that I could do or like had to do at that time. But there was a beautiful like clarity to that too, and simplicity.
Yeah. And in that other homily, he quoted Nietzsche, who's not maybe a fan of Christianity in general, but I know you said Pope Benda quoted him too. So maybe
he quoted him all the time.
And sometimes we can learn from the people we disagree with.
Yeah.
But he had this line that I thought was good that goes to this third question too of the practicality. He said, we can endure any circumstance when we have a strong enough why.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we have a reason for our being or our existence. And you know, Christianity, well, clearly, you know, Christ is presenting us, you know,
a big why,
a big why here today. And you know, I think that just works. You know, where you know, Father Denis is acting practically like, what do I do in this? But I think it's fair in this whole broad thing of the questions. Everybody's asking a lot of questions right now, and COVID, and we've been at home, and there's a lot of like, what am I supposed to do? How are we supposed to get through this time? And employment or concerns and politics and health and, but I also think a lot of spiritual questions are bubbling.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I felt kind of an assurance, and maybe I just liked Father Denis daring us again at the end to kind of say like don't be afraid of those questions.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, give them space, give them time, and don't be afraid to ask them. And yeah, and I guess I left that of even in my own family, but also the churches. Like, am I fostering opportunities and spaces for people to feel comfortable to, you know, ask their questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Any other nuggets of wisdom on your end?
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there's just so much in this gospel, right? And then these two homilies we're pulling in. But I do like, I guess the way that Father Denis ended it is with the challenge of, I dare you to ask him. And he gave his examples of times when he asked Jesus big questions that Jesus gave him big answers. So I think for us to take from this to not be afraid to ask those questions. And whether it is a big question of what do you want of me? What should I be doing? Or like the more like doubting question, like if you're real, why can't I experience you? Like if you love us, why is COVID happening? But to dare us to bring those questions to him. Yeah.
Amen. Well, I think maybe we can use that to tie a nice little bow on this. Yeah. And an encouragement, I guess, to the two of us here, but all of you listening and watching along on the internet is, and maybe if you wish to share, is what are the questions on your heart right now? You know, maybe, you know, what is a question you need to ask? And maybe what is a question that you have asked, and how maybe the Lord has responded. And I think if we're a questioning, courageous, daring kind of community of faith, you know, I think that brings vibrancy. Like, you know, when I think of the idea of daring, is there's a risk. You know, I'm heightened. I'm more aware of what's around us, and so I'm excited to ask some questions.
Yeah,
and
I like that, questioning in faith. I like that as
and
challenge to take from this.
So don't be afraid of that. Feel free to ask the questions, knowing that the Lord is wanting to respond, and maybe as Father Denis said, planting those questions in your heart. So just know that we're encouraging and we're with you in that time. And good to have you back, Father Matt.
Thank you, and thanks for holding down the fort. You did a good job.
We try our best. Yeah. We try our best, and we'll see you guys soon.
Amen.
God bless.